I don't remember when I started to think something strange was going on, but even at the start, it felt like there was more than we weren't seeing.
It was a local phenomenon. You couldn't escape it. Restaurants, TV show, toys.
You never really saw the people in charge. You just sort of saw this trail of scandals slowly get covered up.
They acted like you'd forget after a while. But you don't just forget something like that in a small town.
A place of fantasy and fun has turned into a waking nightmare. Earlier tonight, 5 children went missing inside the local restaurant, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The children were last seen entering the restaurant this afternoon.
It seemed like every time they opened something new, it'd happen again. It's like the place was cursed.
I felt like that was the tipping point where we just couldn't ignore what was happening anymore.
In hindsight, you realize how obvious this all was. I guess part of me never wanted to believe it. I never realized how far back this went.
We lived in Hurricane most of our lives. I moved down here when I was 8 for my father's job, and I met my husband later that summer. He lived 4 doors down from me. We were all very close growing up.
I proposed the night we graduated high school, and we've been together ever since. Hurricane isn't particularly big or special. We have about 6,000 people living here, but through one person or another, we pretty much know everyone. You go to church on Sunday, and you see your landscaper, your dentist, your high school math teacher. At the time, we thought this could be a really safe place to settle down and raise a kid.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, the non-adult population wasn't too substantial. Hurricane wasn't a big producer of anything. We were mainly one of those towns you stop in or you drive through on your way to where you're going. Most people who lived here didn't even work here. The after-school programs were underfunded. The public pool had been closed for years. There weren't a lot of things that catered specifically to kids. That's why Fredbear seemed so exciting.
Yeah, I knew the owner. My parents knew his parents. They were part of a really well-liked family. I remember that the franchise rights to Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese were really expensive at that time, so he said, why not start up my own business?
And this is my loving wife, Clara. Say hi.
Hello.
Made some yummy dinner and maybe make some room for some dessert. Oh, jeez.
His name was William Afton, and anything anybody ever said about him was how brilliant he was. He was a free thinker, an innovator, but he was constantly struggling to get a business up and running. But he had such a passion for entertainment. Fredbear's opened in 1981 when I was a sophomore in high school. And the inside was pretty simple. There was a couple of lines of tables for the kids to sit at and a few colored lights, patterned rugs, and wallpaper. And there was a small stage up front for the mascots. William was really adamant about having the kids believe that the mascots were real. But the robots on stage, they were pretty rudimentary. They kind of swiveled their heads and moved one arm up and down, and there was a voice track that played something in a speaker behind them. So he had these hand-stitched costumes made to kind of look like the mascots on stage, and we would walk around in between shows. There was a yellow bear costume for Fredbear and a yellow rabbit suit for Bonnie the Bunny. And I remember that one was his favorite. I was brought on as a part-time character performer, and he ran everything behind the scenes. And whenever there was a big party or a special event, he'd join me in the costumes and walk around. He loved saying hi to the kids and letting them play with his ears, but he never let anybody else in the Bonnie suit. He was very protective over that character. He seemed really good with the kids, I remember him saying he had a couple of his own.
I lived down the road from William for about 10 years. I'd often see him out mowing the lawn, grilling the back with his family. I never thought anything bad of him. I didn't have a reason to. I don't know how he was with the kids, but he always seemed to be at the restaurant. There was his wife, Clara, and when I first met them, he had 2 boys, Michael and Evan. William always mentioned wanting a daughter.
Things were pretty good for a while, until we started to get some competition. Chica's Party World opened later that fall and immediately took about 75% of our business. From what I understand, it was an outside investor looking to bring high quality entertainment to rural areas. They got permits and construction was finished in a couple of months. William was pretty upset about that whole thing, but I don't blame him. We just could not compete. Those robotics and those mascots, it was like nothing I had seen at that point. They would wave at the kids and blink and turn their heads and talk to each other. Hell, they even had like synced jaws that played with the restaurant music. There were these really big farm animals, these really big eyes. I got let go a couple months later because we just couldn't keep up with the cost. I heard that William would stay at Fredbear's all day, sometimes overnight. I always wondered what he was doing there so much time, all alone.
Yeah, so I was hired as the restaurant manager before we opened Chica's. I worked alongside the chief technician, a man named Henry Emily. He was the one who was sort of responsible for the design of the animatronics and was part of the founding team. He was this insanely smart dude who always had his mind on the next big thing. He was a single dad. He had 1 daughter, a girl named Charlotte. I saw her around the office sometimes, and she was pretty adorable. She was very interested in Henry's work, all the animatronics and how they worked. There was a lot of potential with his skills, and corporate thought they could make good use of it. I remember about 5 months after opening, senior management flew in to check on the business, and they saw an opportunity to buy out Fredbear's. I was one of a few people to stay on with Henry during this time, and soon enough, he actually met with William Afton, the owner of Fredbear's restaurant. They hit it off pretty quickly. Henry was really gripped with William's imagination, and he saw the charm in the local small-town feel of the restaurant and its characters. William was pretty adverse to all this to start. I think it was a pride thing, but eventually he had to accept the offer, and he came under the umbrella. But their partnership was so strong that he convinced William to put a big portion of his life savings to buy in, and he was made partner. The branding stayed the same at William's request, and Henry was actually able to bring in his expertise and create some new characters for the restaurant. They brought over Chica from the other restaurant and eventually came up with the red fox thing, Foxy, and a blue bunny clone of that yellow Bonnie. Yeah, I remember upper management was really pushing hard to get the yellow Bonnie out. They kept saying, kids will get confused with 2 yellow characters, but William didn't want to budge.
It's amazing, you know? You create an endoskeleton that you can crawl into.
You're rubbing it in my face right now. I couldn't get it to work.
You got to learn to open up and accept help. Where would either of us be without that buyout?
With the smallest amount of respect, I'm trying to work.
With cash infusion from investors, Henry started to think of new ways to grow and expand the business. We started selling all sorts of merchandise: toys, masks, t-shirts, cups, posters. We even got a spot on the local TV station and produced this really rinky-dink cartoon show featuring all the new mascots, minus the gold Bonnie. Eventually, the new characters got so popular and the restaurant got so crowded that management decided to spin them off to a new location. The less popular mascots from Chica's eventually got sold off to a warehouse. I have no idea where they ended up, if anywhere. Kids missed the bear, but I remember William didn't want to send Fredbear to another restaurant, so corporate had a recolored brown version built to go in the new restaurant. And marketing had apparently done some test groups and were trying to push, oh, people don't really resonate with the name Fredbear. They don't understand it. Oh, kids are really responding to wilder names with alliteration like Freddy, Fazbear. And as soon as they said that, it was pretty much set in stone.
Welcome to your new career as a performer/entertainer for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
It became the name of the restaurant. It was pushed as this new character on an all-new wave of merchandising. So much so that people started calling it Fazbear Fever.
Coming to celebrate such a special moment, I'm pleased to officially welcome you to the brand new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with one of the most brilliant minds I've ever known. Henry here is a visionary roboticist. Without him, we'd just be a little family restaurant working out of a shack. Now every kid in Hurricane has a chance to experience high-quality entertainment, games, food, and more.
The parent company soon enough rebranded to Fazbear Entertainment and put all of its focus into making this a chain, expanding beyond this community. But things didn't really work out because of what happened after.
911, what's your emergency? There's been an accident. One of the kids, the bear hurt the kid. Ma'am, could you please talk slowly and explain where you are? Explain the situation. Fredbear's diner. One of the kids got his head stuck in the robots and it broke down. We're sending units to your patient. Evan, what happened?
So around this time, Henry and William had been experimenting at Fredbear's with new technology, trying to make the characters more lifelike. Henry had come up with this sort of hybrid suit design. It was based off a bunch of spring-like mechanisms, where these more rudimentary animatronics could have their internals pushed out so that a human could be in the suit. It basically fulfilled William's first big dream of wanting the animatronics to seamlessly go from performing on stage to walking down to interact with the kids. The tech was pretty proprietary. We'd only overseen a few tests before we debuted them publicly. William was just eager to get them out there. We found out very quickly that there was a major design flaw where moist breath, water, anything like that could loosen the locks and the springs could reset back to animatronic mode. When we learned of that, Henry insisted that we pull back on the rollout and just keep the animatronics in stationary mode on the stage and have the employees go back to wearing costumes until he could get it fixed.
William was spending a lot more time at the restaurant then, and Clara was coming along with their third child, a daughter. I'd become good friends with her, keeping her company on those long days alone. And sometimes she'd ask me to sit for Michael and Evan. Michael was around 12 at that time, and Evan was about to turn 10.
Michael's not playing fair.
And two, he's just a sore loser.
Hey, Daddy said you weren't allowed to hit me with a stick.
Doesn't mean I had to listen.
Hey, what did I tell you about being nice to each other? He's the only brother you've got. Michael, we're not always going to be here. It's going to be up to you to take care of each other.
Okay, boys, open it.
Cool.
You like him? You're the first ones to ever see anything from the new characters.
I mean, I like the fox one. He's a pirate. Arr.
Evan, what's wrong?
I don't like it.
Just put it on, dork.
When William first built Fredbear's, it was down the block from his house, and so Michael and Evan liked to go up there a lot. Really, there was an excuse why William couldn't ever come back home. I guess he just didn't want to. Evan was always a little scared of the robots, and Michael liked to pick on him, but I don't think it was ever malicious. It was just how the little boys got along.
Happy birthday, sweetie. Evan, what's wrong?
Michael and his friends are being mean to me. They're calling me lame. I don't even want to be here.
Okay, that's it. I'll talk to him.
No, I just want to go home.
When we got the call, we weren't sure what to expect. I was just a deputy officer at the time, been on the force a little over a year. We got to the restaurant, it had been cleared out. We set a perimeter and went inside. We saw Henry in the back corner shouting at somebody on the phone, and William laying at the foot of the robots on the stage. I've seen a lot of things in my time on the force, but I've never seen anybody that distraught. The victim was just hanging out of the bear's mouth. The mechanisms inside the jaw had snapped, and the force of that had caved in his skull in 3 places.
It was Evan's birthday party. Some kids thought it'd be funny to prank him, and they didn't realize what would happen. They rushed him to the hospital, and I don't think he lived for more than a few hours after that.
We talked with several witnesses, including the boy's father, about what had happened. Multiple people said that they'd seen 4 kids pick the boy up and forcefully shove him in the bear's mouth. They couldn't be properly identified because they were wearing masks. We asked William for confirmation, but he was very reserved, very quiet. Since he couldn't give us anything definitive, we called it what it was, a tragic accident. I don't know why William wouldn't talk to us. I got the impression he was covering for somebody. He was very standoffish.
This was pretty much the nail in the coffin for Fredbears and those characters. If you ask me, it saved the company a lot of trouble, not having to try to phase them out without upsetting William. It was a combination of things, most obviously the bite, but William was starting to change. He started to resent Henry and the company. He blamed him for the suits malfunctioning. But we ended up moving the spring lock suits into storage at the sister location. Henry had redesigned the suits so they couldn't be operated by an employee. They'd walk around on their own, but with no human involvement. It didn't look great, but it was the best we could do with the limitations.
I would often look out my window and see William and Clara fighting, screaming at each other in their kitchen. I wasn't surprised that it was happening. That sort of thing is something a lot of marriages can't come back from.
Where is he?
Where have you been?
It's none of your business what I do in my spare time. Where is he?
Leave him alone tonight. He's had a rough day.
He is my son. He will listen to whatever I tell him to.
William.
I'll find a way in from the outside.
Where are you going?
I'm sorry, Evan. I'm sorry for what I did. I never wanted to hurt you. I hope you can forgive me.
Later that year, Clara had their 3rd child, a daughter, Elizabeth. She was the cutest little thing you'd ever seen. Vibrant green eyes and the widest smile. She was a good girl.
Fredbears had to close down pretty soon after the incident, and so we just had the first Freddy's up and standing. The brand at that point had almost nothing to do with William's original idea, and because of how things happened, there wasn't much he could do about it. He was pretty grief-stricken, and so he sold off his shares of the company and kind of became a recluse. I think Fredbear's got turned into a bar. I think William was always kind of around there, whether that was because it was so close to home or he couldn't let go of Fredbear's, I don't know. As an extra security measure, Henry installed this security device at Freddy's. It was this humanoid, thin kind of puppet thing. He had it synced to these bracelets that every kid in the restaurant got, and they were customized for each kid. Parents could set boundaries for them, where if they got outside of a certain radius, the puppet would sort of roll over and guide them back. It was designed to maintain immersion while still keeping the kids away from the stage, or if they reserved a specific party room. And if a kid ever went near the exit, it would block them. It was a pretty genius idea and alleviated a lot of strain on the employee's side. But I guess some things always have a way of going wrong.
It was about 8 months after the Fredbear's incident when we got another call to Freddy Fazbear's. We didn't have to get inside before we saw Henry again. This time he'd fallen over something outside on the ground, just heaving. We approached him and we saw he was cradling a young girl, his daughter Charlotte. The autopsy revealed she'd received blunt force trauma to the back of the head and had been stabbed with a jagged, sharp piece of metal in her back 3 times. In between the rain and Henry's contamination, it was difficult to parse anything about who did this. The security cameras on the outside of the building were few and far between, and that's if they were working at any given time. That technology wasn't as reliable back then. We deduced that she'd been locked out of the restaurant sometime earlier that evening. This security device they'd installed had malfunctioned, and so it wasn't able to keep her inside.
The puppet thing managed to open up the back door of the restaurant, which got several employees' attention, and that's when they went out to see it lying next to Charlotte. Henry never really talked about it afterwards. I asked him a couple times if he'd ever wondered who'd done it, but everyone sort of chalked it up to another random act of violence. Because it happened outside the grounds, we couldn't necessarily be held liable, and as much as the city threatened to shut us down, we remained open, but it definitely didn't help the restaurant's reputation. The puppet got decommissioned and put into storage with the spring-locked suits. Upper management deemed it ineffective and a waste of resources to try and fix it. And not to mention, people just found the mask to be pretty creepy. I always thought the eyes would follow you throughout the restaurant, but I was told they never installed axes in the eye slots for them to move. Yeah, they'd play it off as if we were trying to improve the image of the brand, but Fazbear Entertainment always just liked to bury things that they were ashamed of.
Do you think William had something to do with it?
With Charlotte? I don't know, but I don't think he ever really got over the death of his kid. So around that time, William was working independently. He'd poured himself into his work. He was developing his own sort of side business, taking what he'd learned working with Henry to design his own animatronics. He launched Afton Robotics, I think in 1983 or early 1984. Freddy's was operating almost exclusively in the red for the better part of a year. Henry and all of the staff were spread too thin, and apparently William wasn't doing too well either. He was struggling to keep his business afloat. I think it was sort of a mutual desperation they found themselves in when William asked Henry if he could come back to the company.
After Fredbear's closed down, William didn't spend much more time at home and instead spent most of his time at his new workshop. When he rejoined the restaurant, he had to drive even further out of his way to go there. He didn't seem to want to be with his family anymore. I guess it hurt too much.
I think it was a combination of marital strain, financial strain, a bit of ego with his business not taking off. And Henry, surprisingly, said yes. He was always one to turn the other cheek.
There wasn't anything particularly notable about that day. We were both at work, and so we had sent our son Jeremy out to meet a couple of friends for the day. And they had decided to meet up at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza at 12. He told us that they were going to also meet up with a couple of younger girls from the school. I remember coming home about 5:15 that afternoon, and Jeremy wasn't home. And I thought that was bizarre. He never stayed out that late during the day. So my husband and I drove to the restaurant. We were surprised to see that there were 4 or 5 police cars in the parking lot with their lights flashing. Several other parents waiting around outside the building. Apparently, some kids had gone missing inside the restaurant earlier that afternoon, but nobody knew when exactly. A couple parents had been there with their kids and didn't really notice they were even gone until they had tried to grab them to go home. It was Jeremy, his friends Fritz, Crawford, Gabriel Walker, and their friends from school, Susie Burke and Cassidy Pruitt. The boys were 13 and 14 at the time, and I think the girls were 12 and 13.
By this time, I'd been promoted to captain, so I was the one to assume command over the scene. After we cleared the restaurant, we looked over the security footage, and we found these kids were lured away, one at a time, to the back area of the restaurant. We were only able to catch something out of this one angle. It looked like one of the animatronics was moving around, guiding them to this room out of view of the cameras. From what we were able to tell, it looked like the Rabbit, one of the older models that had been decommissioned. The camera feed ran up until the restaurant had to be evacuated. Someone intentionally cut the feed. We sent a team into the back room to investigate, but we couldn't find any bodies, any sign of the missing children. William Afton was the only employee working that day who had access to those back rooms and to the security office where he could have tampered with the security tapes. We took him in for questioning, and as soon as word got out about that, it drew quite the audience. We held him 24 hours longer than we legally could without charging him, but we were scrambling to find something definitive to pin on him. Unfortunately, we just couldn't stick him with anything, so we had to let him go.
After thorough review, we still have yet to log down a prime suspect. We haven't formally charged any individual, but are pursuing all possible leads.
A place of fantasy and fun has turned into a waking nightmare. Earlier tonight, 5 children went missing inside the local restaurant Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The children were last seen entering the restaurant this afternoon, but were not seen leaving the premises. The parents of these children can't rest with so little in the way of closure.
It's one of my few big failings serving as captain, but nothing like that had ever happened in Hurricane before. I mean, we were barely getting by on our limited resources. Now, I don't want to make undue connections, but 3 of those kids were close friends of William's son, Michael. And no official incident report had been filed on the initial incident back in 1983, but I recognized some of the faces of those missing kids. But something didn't add up. We didn't have all the answers.
We heard all the theories from parents about the kids and how they were connected, and honestly, it just made it worse. Cassidy had gone there with her friend Susie, who was a kid in our neighborhood. She'd gone over to her house before. Susie encouraged her to come along to meet some of her friends at Freddy's. She was a young girl. She was always pretty shy and felt it was easier to follow others around than to stick up for herself. Maybe she just saw something she shouldn't have. She was an innocent girl. She didn't deserve that. I don't believe in much, but I have a feeling that taking someone that young, that innocent, that's going to come back for you sooner or later.
We talked to the other parents, of course, over the years. Speaking from experience, we know it's hard to see the story and the mystery behind what happened to those kids outlive their memory. And so I wanted to take a second to remember them as they were. Gabriel was a carefree boy. He had such a big imagination. He loved to draw and create these elaborate scenarios in his head with his action figures. Fritz was a rough kid, always getting into some sort of trouble. He just didn't like to sit still. He loved riding on his bike or scooter all around his neighborhood, and he loved climbing anything in sight. Our girl was sweet. She and Susie always liked to play out in the yard. You could usually find them rolling around in the dirt, digging up worms. Cassidy was always so interested in bugs. We thought she'd grow up to be a scientist.
Jeremy was such a gifted boy. All you could ever get him to talk about was baseball. He loved playing catch in the yard. He would turn everything he could into a makeshift ball and bat. I think he would have slept in his uniform if I'd let him. I'm sorry.
We shut down temporarily to allow for the investigation to wrap up. We reopened after a few months with a pretty low attendance. Pretty soon after that, people started rumors that the place was haunted. They said the characters' eyes would follow you around the restaurant. The animatronics would just stop in the middle of their walking cycle and stare at nothing in the distance. I admit it was pretty creepy closing at night when you're all alone, but I never saw anything myself.
To my right again. 37 right behind you. We're off and running. Is there a bid for either 1 or 2?
We couldn't maintain business like that for long, and Henry just decided to shut the restaurant down until we could restructure things. I think he definitely became suspicious of William after that. He never definitively said one way or the other, but their relationship was definitely fraying over time. I remember people started looking at Henry, saying he was responsible for the missing children's incident. I don't understand why, but people thought because he was so closely tied to the restaurant, he could have been there, covering up his own tracks. We officially reopened at a new location almost 2 years later to the day we closed the first restaurant in November 1987.
After a string of controversy, Freddy Fazbear's is looking to reopen. The question is, will they be able to escape the shadow of their past?
We opened in a bigger building with more of a focus on rides and games and less on the mascot characters. But the ones we did have out were pretty state-of-the-art. Henry had redesigned the characters to more closely match the toys and merchandise we'd been selling for years to make them look less creepy. And he'd secretly installed this facial recognition software in each of them that was tied to a national criminal database. The goal was that the restaurant would have a 24/7 network of security guards, making sure nothing like the missing children's incident could happen again. Henry had repurposed parts from the original 4 Freddy's animatronics for the toys, and that was around the time he got weirdly quiet.
What did you do? What did you do?
I didn't do
What
anything.
did you do?
What is your problem? I didn't do anything.
He publicly confronted William about something in the back office, screaming and pointing. It sounded like he was threatening him. After that, William left the building, and Henry said that William was no longer with the company. I think he saw something in the animatronics. I don't want to assume the worst, but maybe there was a reason we couldn't find those missing kids. Soon after, Henry took a major step back from the company in a design and management capacity. He said that he wanted to take a sabbatical, but he never came back in a present way. People talked, of course. Rumors bled out into the community. What might have caused such a reaction? I tried bringing up what Henry had maybe seen to upper management, but nothing came of it. They said they'd launch an internal investigation, whatever that meant. They mentioned possibly closing down for a couple days, but never did. That was the first moment I felt like the people in charge had their own self-interest in mind, just trying to stay afloat. But then the situation became clear and unavoidable.
The next case was a mess from every angle. We weren't even notified until 24 hours after management was made aware. Apparently, some day shift employee came in to find 5 bodies strewn across the restaurant. An analysis of the bodies recovered showed that they were the kids that went missing back in 1985. It was as if the person responsible had just been hiding, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves, to reveal what he'd done, at the perfect time to sabotage the restaurant, to make sure it would never be free of this.
I heard that a new day shift guard we'd hired a few weeks prior failed to show up the next day and basically vanished off the face of the earth after that. They talked about letting him go for some suspicions on something, but he fled before they could. I think his name was Dave Miller. We tried looking back through our records, but we couldn't find anyone by that name with any traceable history. No phone, no address, no social security number. So even if we wanted to track this guy down, we couldn't. Hell, it could have been anybody, but the thing is, the facial recognition software didn't identify anyone who was a threat. It could have been William. I mean, he was never formally convicted. Upper management made the decision to clean up the scene and alert the authorities after closing on Friday. We had one last event scheduled for that week, a private birthday party. Freddy's was still struggling financially, and I think they wanted to bring in as much revenue as they could before they had to shut down again. But I think that only made it worse.
It was a disgusting cover-up. Fazbear Entertainment was more concerned with making a little bit more money than making sure the kids were safe.
They didn't make it a full day. We had an unfinished toy animatronic, Toy Foxy, that was laying out in the open around that time, and kids just went crazy for it. They treated it like a jungle gym, climbing all over it, pulling it apart, and sticking things where they didn't belong. This happened so frequently, the staff started nicknaming it the Mangle. I tried to discourage this, but we really didn't have the staff to ensure that. We'd had to roll over one of our nighttime staff to day shift to cover Dave's spot, so he was already extremely exhausted. He was posted up near a back corner when, without warning, the Mangle animatronic stood up and attacked him. I never heard someone in that much pain before. I rushed over and saw the animatronic's jaw wrapped around this guy's head.
I don't know exactly what happened. I remember feeling hot, and then I remember feeling cold, and then I just kind of felt very numb. And I woke up in the hospital, and they said the frontal part of my brain had been damaged, along with some of the surrounding areas. Someone actually came into the hospital, and they said that they would pay for my surgery if I would sign a paper. It was going to be $7,000 to cover the medical bills, but I couldn't talk about what happened or even say that they were responsible for what happened.
And how much of your bills did that payoff cover?
Not even half of it. I'm still in debt because of it.
Do you blame the company for what happened?
I don't know. I felt like it was targeting me.
A bombshell report. 5 bodies found at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location.
Can confirm that the bodies found belong to the same 5 children missing from
Allegedly, management was made aware of this days
A
before.
serious investigation has begun digging into Fazbear Entertainment's knowledge of this and their involvement in this truly tragic incident.
I found out, along with the public, that the company had attempted to cover up the bodies being found. Upper management had gone completely over my head just for a quick buck. That, coupled with the bite, was just an overall horrible look for the company, if not criminal. The restaurant closed down, I think maybe a few weeks after opening. At that point, I decided it was time to throw in the towel, and I quit Freddy's.
So, before being appointed as regional development head at Fazbear Entertainment, I worked in a regional manager role where I oversaw the general management at all Freddy's locations. And the board said my insight into the goings-on at the ground level would be a great tool to have at the corporate level, so I was promoted in 1989. And as regional development head, I was responsible for formulating and pitching new concepts for the brand. With our head engineer and one of our founding members out of the picture, we needed to find someone with a strong engineering background that could not only maintain these ridiculously complex animatronics, but keep building upon that. You know, William Afton's name had been floated around several times, but nobody was too keen to commit. He'd had a controversial history with the company before being publicly let go from our second Freddy's location, but that had been several years ago by this point. We approached Afton that year and pitched this concept for a new restaurant in the same vein as Freddy's, but still pivoting away from the brand focus because of the hot water we've been in and for the past few years.
No doubting what you've done on a technological level. These are clearly state-of-the-art. They're just certain design choices that we were hoping that you could shed some light on.
She can dance, she can sing. With helium tanks, she can inflate balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, these aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
He designed these characters to be a lot more human-like, with this sleek, polished, and white and pink design. They had all these new moving parts and features we didn't really understand. It was like something from the next century. We reused a couple of characters like Freddy and Foxy, and I think we were able to sneak Bonnie in there eventually, but the main focus was the new animatronics. A human-esque ballerina character and this bulky cartoon clown character. He named her Baby. Apparently it was the nickname of his own daughter. We thought it was great, and the focus on the girls 6 to 12 market went over well with investors. Afton was an innovator and an asset to the company again. I didn't think it was too strange in being so cooperative and eager to help. I mean, I didn't know that much about him before the development of Circus babies, but from what I heard, it sounded like his entire focus had changed from the robot technology to focusing on the kids.
Several years after the shuttering of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a new restaurant is coming to town. This restaurant is set to feature a new cast of characters that they say are state-of-the-art.
During the development process for the restaurant, Afton actually approached the board to request a management position. He pleaded his case and eventually convinced them to let him buy the franchise rights to that location, and he became the owner and operator. He wanted absolute total control of what was happening inside that restaurant. I mean, if you ask me, I think he just wanted to reclaim what he'd lost. But his insistence never sat right with me.
We didn't know what was being built. And even right when it was opening, we had no idea it was so connected to Freddy's.
I think it was done intentionally so that people wouldn't start writing and try to keep it from opening. But I feel like at that point you shouldn't be in business if you keep having to downplay that many scandals to get people to come to your restaurant.
No, of course I didn't go. I don't know anybody that did go. But I remember driving past and seeing several cars parked there.
I remember sitting down with my coffee the next morning and seeing that the restaurant had completely shut down. There were just reports of a gas leak in the evening, and some suits came in and said the building was inhospitable and condemned it on the spot.
I've tried to look this up over the years, but all I can find are some very grainy photos of the robots. I haven't seen or heard anything about them since. They just sort of disappeared. And I'm betting it's because they definitely had something to do with the closure. Maybe they just got sold off to some distribution warehouse. I can't imagine anyone else having to interact with these death traps.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. Come join the circus.
We know the official story was that the gas leak forced the building to be condemned, but we couldn't find any official filings with the city citing that reason for the closure. We were just wondering if you'd be able to explain the closure of Circus Babies in a bit more detail.
No comment.
After that restaurant closed, William got even more reserved. And I heard from another friend of Clara's that she filed for divorce. Michael was 18 by now and he had moved away. And I suppose William lost custody of his daughter because when Clara left, so did she. I don't know for sure. William was very protective of Elizabeth after what happened to his other child. He never let her near those robots.
Did you ever learn where Clara went after she divorced him?
Well, that's the thing. I never heard it had been finalized. One day she was there and the next she was gone.
Do you think that something happened to her?
Well, I'd hate to say, but yes.
We were wondering if you'd seen these photos of the animatronics from Circus Babies. Do you know where he could have come up with some of these designs? There was this ballerina figure.
Oh my, that looks just like her.
Like who?
Clara.
So I'd been following the progress of Freddy's over the years in passing. After Circus Baby shut down, I heard through a friend that still worked at Fazbear Entertainment that they were discussing reopening the original Freddy's location, where the 5 kids went missing. I knew the condition of that place. It was in severe disrepair, but at that point, I think they were just trying anything to stay afloat. It eventually opened in 1993, and by that point, I just thought, who even cares about this? Why is this still going?
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
The nights leading up to William disappearing were notable. He was still living in that same house alone. And he'd get into his car around the same time each night and go drive. I don't know where, and I don't really care to, but he'd always come back a couple hours later very quietly and entered his house carrying a big box of things. He was working on something. He'd had this pattern before, about the same time they were working on that second restaurant. If he was stealing from that restaurant, I don't know what.
I remember that night because it was pouring down rain. It was probably the worst storm we'd gotten that year. We got a call reporting a break-in at Freddy's. This was about a month before it was set to open again. Nobody had tripped the security cameras, but the back door had been noticeably propped open. We didn't see any signs of forced entry, which is what made us start looking for current and past employees. The robots were lying in the hallway near the back door, all in a pile, completely dismantled. It looked like someone had taken a hammer to them, just beaten them to pieces. We speculated this might have something to do with more angry protesters trying to shut the restaurant down before it could open again. Henry was still the property manager at the time, even though he had stepped back from the company. But he was called in to help us complete our report. He canvassed the area, came back almost in a trance. He was very hushed, very dismissive. Said nothing had been stolen. There was no need for us to continue our investigation.
In the wake of that incident, under Henry's suggestion, we started hiring night guards at both Freddy's locations. It was mainly to protect the assets. We only had one restaurant potentially reopening at that time, but just in case things took an upswing, we wanted to make sure the process of reopening would be as smooth as possible. We started to shutter a bunch of unusable areas in the restaurant, mostly storage closets and archive rooms. We wanted to streamline the flow of the restaurants and update the look to prepare for renovations. We installed false walls with the intention to rework those rooms when the time came. You know, I never saw what we were keeping back there. I never asked. It's sort of one of those things that make you wonder.
A few days after the break-in, we received a call about a car that had run off the road about 15 miles outside of town. We pulled off the side of the road and immediately saw visible tire tracks veering off of the shoulder and down a small slope into a river. Upon recovery of the vehicle, we found that the plates were registered to William Afton. His DNA was found in the car, but we weren't able to recover a body. At that point, we felt we had a reasonable claim to probable cause, where we'd cite his health and safety, but really, we put together a team to search Afton's house in relation to the break-in and see what else we could gather. We arrived to find it empty, but untouched. There were papers scattered everywhere, mechanical parts stacked in boxes all around. There were blueprints lying on every surface, designs for more robots, strange mechanical claws, a lot of prototypes. Some of the stuff he was writing about sounded insane, trying to revive the dead, lifelike robotic bodies. It was like you'd stepped into a mad scientist lab. But we couldn't find anything he'd referenced, let alone anything that could tie him to anything. So we had to let him go. We chalked it up to a bunch of projects that just never came to fruition. He was always thinking about the next thing. I was a little suspicious of Henry at that time, if he'd been responsible for Afton's car in the river, but what else was there to go off of?
Yeah, and Freddy's reopened later that month. Apparently, Henry had reconstructed the animatronics to working shape. The business went along pretty well for a while. Henry had always had such an affinity for those characters. I guess he just didn't want to see them die.
The investigation into William Afton's disappearance ran cold after a couple of months. With nothing definitive to tie him back to, there wasn't really a strong motivation in the department to continue devoting resources. The first restaurant reopened and was operating at a pretty meager capacity for a couple of years. I'm surprised it stayed open as long as it did. In the fall of 1993, dispatch put through a call of a fire starting at the closed down second location. The security guard they'd hired had failed to report for his shift on time, and by the time he arrived, the building was already up in flames. I was called down there once the fire department suspected possible arson. We determined that there was an accelerant used throughout the building. and a pocket lighter recovered at the site was believed to have started the fire. The fire was started towards the back of the building, in the security office. There were a lot of theories about who was responsible. There were still scattered protests at the time, but it's unclear how they would have gotten into the back office. We questioned the security guard, a man named Fritz Smith, but he was never seriously considered because nobody was able to place him at the scene anywhere that night. The thing is, if you're going to just vandalize the restaurant, there's a million ways you could get in easier. All the robots and the things you'd associate with the restaurant were up towards the front of the building. I wondered if it was possible that whoever did this was trying to somehow tamper with the investigation. The office would archive security footage, the boarded up back rooms with all the decommissioned characters. That's the stuff you only care about if you know what you're going after. The second fire wasn't too long after that. This time the reopened location was hit. Same story. Middle of the night, no guard on duty. We couldn't even get in contact with that guy. He just sort of vanished. The fire started in the back security office and the entire building was destroyed. It became sort of an unspoken agreement at the department that we just let this ride itself out. Personally, whoever was responsible for these incidents wasn't doing anything wrong. And I think we were all ready to just forget about Freddy's.
After the fires, the company went dormant for a long time. It was only supposed to be a temporary restructuring period, but eventually business just stopped altogether. The brand wasn't dissolved, mostly to keep imitators from using the name and likeness in disparaging ways. The only major problem I saw came about 30 years later.
Another controversy in the long-spanning saga of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This time, thanks to a spoof attraction, Fazbear's Fright, a horror spin on the franchise in the form of a haunted house.
Some individual decided to take the brand and make a pop-up haunted house about 5 miles away from the original Freddy's location.
I guess someone decided enough time had passed, and it was okay to make our kid's death into the theme of a haunted house.
I was furious, and a lot of people in the town were too. The people that still remembered what happened tried everything they could do legally to get this place shut down, but nobody was going to listen to us. Am I surprised or upset at what happened? Hell no.
Who approved this? Just a bunch of greedy snakes on the city council looking for any way to pad their wallets.
It's messed up. It's been years. Why can't we just let these people move on?
It makes me feel embarrassed to live in this town. It just puts another huge red stain on the town's history.
Whoever's behind this abomination is a disturbed, sick individual who gets absolutely zero sympathy from me. It's cruel. Not to mention, it's stealing. They should be punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Yeah, so I got the idea of Fazbear's Fright back in college, man. A friend of my roommates, he was telling me about how in his hometown back in the 80s, but basically, these kids got murdered, and when they did, they started haunting all these animatronics and the restaurants they were killed in. I was thinking to myself, that's the coolest idea I've ever heard. So I dropped out of college and decided to go into the business field. Because the best thing you can have is real hands-on experience, you know what I mean?
Beware, Fazbear. Come down to Fazbear Fright. See for yourself if the hauntings are real. Ghosts, killer robots, horrors wait at every corner. Enter if you dare. Tickets on sale now.
He had cobbled together old memorabilia, animatronic parts, masks, all from unsanctioned auctions and back alley dealings. We really only had a case against him once he named the attraction Fazbear's Fright. Freddy Fazbear was still a registered trademark, so we prepared to sue. We didn't get too far, obviously.
I was pissed about the fire, man. We're all set to open next week. It's gonna be huge. We managed to sneak into this old, torn down building and found this real vintage animatronic. Nothing. I didn't sneak anywhere. It's a joke. It's a joke. Are you guys gonna leave this in?
That final restaurant was strange from the start. We were approached by an anonymous investor that wanted to revitalize the brand. He had all these ideas laid out in a proposal for a revamped but classic rendition of the original restaurant. It was entirely independently owned and operated. He sourced all these classic games and animatronics from the old restaurants we'd sold off to old warehouses. I mean, it was our only option at that point, considering everyone who had a hand in the designs either stepped back from the company and was just gone. I guess I shouldn't be surprised by that point. Like clockwork, a week before opening, the entire building was destroyed in a fire, including everything inside. I mean, if you tried to tell me this string of events, I'd be hard-pressed to call it anything but an act of God. These things don't just happen, especially with how similar it all was.
Does Fazbear have any comment regarding the... What does this liquidation mean for the future of Freddy?
What do you say to the families of the children who murdered in the restaurant? How will you give them any closure?
No comment at this time.
The board could see the trouble brewing, and they decided it was best to dissolve the company and liquidate the assets before this became something we could be held liable for. I don't blame them.
As strange as it sounds, fires at Freddy's became kind of a running joke around the department. So when we got the call to secure the restaurant, we didn't think much about it. But when we got there, we could tell that something was different. When we surveyed the scene, in addition to the scraps of animatronics and arcade items, we came across 3 bodies buried in the wreckage. They were almost completely unrecognizable at a glance. But our lab techs were eventually able to identify the bodies as belonging to Henry, Emily, William, and Michael Afton. It was determined that Henry had started the fire in the main stage area of the restaurant. The smoke spread into the ventilation system and trapped Michael, who was in the back security office. William was actually found lodged inside one of the robotic suits from way back in the day. The spring mechanism had snapped shut and had lodged themselves in his skin. He was basically trapped there. So much of his flesh had been singed, we weren't able to determine how long he'd been in there. His son, on the other hand, looked like he'd been completely disemboweled. We couldn't find any trace of where those missing organs could have gone, or how the hell he survived as long as he did. I mean, I could explain what happened if you'd paid me. A bitter recluse, missing for decades, his son, who left town at the age of 18, and the man basically responsible for starting and shutting down this whole franchise, right there in the same time, same place. And the only people that could probably tell us what really happened that night were in that room.
I suppose you could call it relief. There was nothing left of that place that they could rebuild from.
I remember when we found out who was in that fire, some people were cheering. The city held a private burial because they were afraid it would draw a crowd. Something bad might happen.
I don't know any reason why Henry would have done that, but I can't deny it happened. No, I don't think that means he was responsible for everything that happened back in the 80s.
Some people saw it as Henry finally getting his retribution, and this totally made it look like William was guilty for everything. But the circumstances just all seemed so weird. I don't know why he would ever willingly get into that suit, especially after what happened to his kid.
Maybe he blamed William for his daughter's death. I don't know. There's just so much speculation when it comes to William. I'd feel wrong just slapping a giant guilty label on him because of one account of him in that same suit.
There's actually one thing I need to mention that we found at the crime scene. This was recovered in the main stage area of the restaurant, close to where we found Henry's body. No one has ever heard this recording. We have no explanation for it. We thought it was best left forgotten. We wanted this to die with them.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth. If you still even remember that name, you've all been called here into a labyrinth of sound and smells, misdirection and misfortune, a labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. And to you, my brave volunteer, I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I'm remaining as well. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this will finally fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although, for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. My daughter, Charlotte, I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest for you and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends for all of us. Ends communication.
If you ask me, that sounds like closure.
Grief can be a powerful feeling. People like to think of it as a certain time frame after a tragedy, but it's something you carry with you for the rest of your life.
Some people can find a power in it, something that drives them, but it can also be a very destructive force. It was only because of my wife here that I was able to keep it from consuming me too.
I think everything, good or bad, that came from Freddy's is gone now, and that's okay. I feel like sometimes the only way to purge all the pain that place caused was to make sure it could never come back.
You can never really know someone, and you can't decide how you leave the world, how you're remembered. It's what you do with your time that decides that. And those children made an impact on so many lives.
Only my little boy knows what happened that day. And that piece was taken away from me. I'm still trying to accept that.
In 100 years, this town will hopefully remember the victims, not their killer. It's the one thing we do know about this whole thing. I trust that they're somewhere safe now, finally resting. If we couldn't bring them peace, hopefully they could provide that for each other.